Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. Welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. Now in the last class, actually in the last 3 classes, we were going over Krishna's wonderful 12 yamas and 12 niyamas. It took us a while to go through the 24 items, but they're so important. I think it was well worth it. But now, having finished this description of the 12 yamas and the 12 niyamas, Krishna goes on to describe, to give the definition of some of those yamas and niyamas and other topics in general connected to the path of self-realization. And these descriptions are very interesting. They reveal, at least to me, they reveal a much deeper level of understanding of what these things actually are and how to practice them. So I think you'll enjoy today's topic. And of course, if you want to watch all these previous classes, we already have 120 classes in this Uddhava-gita course. All you have to do is become a member of this channel. The instructions are here in the description of the video. And then you go to Uddhava-gita.com where you can see the whole course nicely organized. Okay, so now we are in the 11th canto, 19th chapter, and we'll be doing verses 36 to 39. So let's get started. First thing he says, absorbing the intelligence in me constitutes mental equilibrium. So the first definition we'll see today. What's mental equilibrium? And Krishna says that's absorbing your intelligence in me. Now, what is this intelligence? I just posted a video on this topic about the 3 subtle aspects of the Vedic yoga vision of the subtle body: mind, intelligence, and ahankar, the I, the self, the ego. So these 3 things, Krishna is talking about buddhi, the middle one. Keep your buddhi, keep your intelligence fixed on me. When you have your intelligence, what was intelligence? As you can see in that video, intelligence means that what are the parameters you'll be using to manage all the information coming in through the mind. So the mind is collecting all this data, right? It's coming in from the senses, it's coordinating the senses. So the mind has this job of absorbing, organizing, shifting through, and all this data coming in. But it's the intelligence that gives the mind the guidelines of what to do, what's the priority, how to interpret things, what is your worldview. Something happens. Okay, what is that thing that happened? It's the intelligence that tells the mind what that thing is in the yogic perspective. So what Krishna is saying is that buddhi, that intelligence, has to be absorbed in Krishna, in Him. When you absorb your intelligence in Krishna, that means that now everything that you're seeing from the supreme point of view. One of the things that intelligence does is give you your worldview. So why not have a godly worldview? Then you will get mental equilibrium because you'll be seeing things from the perspective of God, as it were. The more you can absorb your mind in God, the more you will have God's perspective on everything you do and see. So you'll understand things from God's point of view. You'll see things happening from God's point of view. And that will give you mental equilibrium because you'll have this concept of eternal time. You will understand the unchanging nature of the self. You will understand the constantly changing nature of material reality. So all these things will give you mental equilibrium. It's a beautiful definition of mental equilibrium, to become Krishna conscious. Second thing, in complete discipline of the senses is self-control. Of course, self-control, discipline of the senses. How do you discipline your senses? You have to be in command. Now, in a separate video, which I also posted recently in this channel, I spoke about how the powerful use sin to control us. And the point of that video was that when you are not in control of yourself, something else is. And that something else is what we call sin. Krishna says, like the 3 gateways to hell. That was what the video was about. The 3 gateways to hell, Krishna says. Lust, greed, anger. So when these things take over, when we have desire taking over our judgment, we no longer have control of our senses because we are not in control. It's the desire, or it's the anger, or it's the greed that's in control. So you lose control. So to have real sense, real self-control, what you have to do is you have to discipline your senses. And how do you discipline your senses? You maintain in control. You don't allow desire to take over. You keep your focus on Dharma. You keep your focus on your true nature. And of course, you keep your focus on Krishna, your mental equilibrium. So you focus on the godly perspective. You're focusing, because once you're in the godly perspective, once you have your intelligence absorbed in Krishna, so then you've developed your God view of the world, then you'll know that Dharma is the best path. Dharma is the way Krishna laid this. It's God's will. Dharma is doing your best, is what God wants you to do according to your situation, your place, your time, what's going on, your moment. That's your Dharma. So when you see your Dharma, that's the best thing to do. And if you follow Dharma, then you're following God's plan. And if you're following God's plan, you'll keep control of your senses. You'll be in self-control. But if you forget Dharma, you're no longer seeing things from the godly perspective. You've completely lost yourself. You become blind. We say that, right? Oh, that person's become blind with greed, blind with desire. We use these expressions because it's true. You actually you lose it. You lose sight of what's important. It's like a part of the language we use. Oh, he lost sight of what's important. He became blind. He couldn't see. Now, why did you lose sight of what's important? Why did you become blinded by greed or anger? Well, we use these expressions. Why? Because you're literally not in charge anymore. You've lost self-control completely. You're not in charge. These things are in charge now. And then your life becomes a disaster and you cause harm to others as well. So, complete discipline of the senses is self-control. Going on, tolerance means patiently enduring unhappiness. That is a profound phrase. What is tolerance? What does it mean to be tolerant? I was just speaking with some of my students just yesterday. 2 students of mine who are going through a lot of hardship. Students who are people deal with hardship. I don't know if you might be one of them. People, I'm always impressed how strong they are. Beautiful that they can take this knowledge and help them with it. So they're actually exactly doing this here. They're using this ability, this tolerance, which they've developed through the practice of the 3T path, the practice of yoga. Because of these instructions, they've developed this tolerance, which allows them to then patiently endure their tribulations. Of course, they're working on to overcome them, but that's what it is. Sometimes you're stuck with something. You have a physical ailment, and you could be stuck with it for life, or for a certain period of time, or you're going through a bad financial period, and it's just, you have to endure it. It's just, you work on it, you try to overcome it, but it's not easy. And people who are going through divorce, so many students have to go through divorce or the death of a loved one. So these things are unhappy. So how do you endure that unhappiness? Tolerance. And again, it's all connected. Because if you're the mental equilibrium of having your intelligence absorbed in Krishna, that's why it was the first thing Krishna mentioned in this list here, was absorbing the intelligence in me, constitutes mental equilibrium, because once you do that, everything else kind of unfolds automatically. So by doing that, by having this God, by having this, your intelligence absorbed in Krishna, you then have the proper view of the world, you have that God view of the world, and therefore you can see things, like you can see the difficulty you're going through from God's perspective. You can take a big, giant step back and see, okay, I have to go through this. It's just my karma. It's just to help me become detached from the world, to focus on my spirituality. It's unhappy. I'm going to endure the unhappiness. I'm not saying it's good, it's unhappy. But that unhappiness is causing me to go deeper. And it's going to give me a benefit in the long run. In the long run, I'm burning my karma, I'm learning my lessons, I'm getting out of here. I'm at least, like I say, at the very least, when you're going through some unhappiness, at the very least, it should help you develop detachment. It should give you a little bit of strength to say, you know what, maybe there's something else. Maybe this isn't the sum total of reality. Maybe I'm not the body. And this isn't like my actual eternal, this isn't just life. My life doesn't just end in this. This isn't just, life is just this. I was born, I'm going to die, and this is life. No. Maybe there's something else. So at the very least, unhappiness will allow you to, cool down your attachments to the world. Not be so, this is so, like a little child, like, this is so exciting, this is so good, and just chase, and then you die, and you do it again, and then you die, and it's so fruitless and pointless. So the unhappiness at least lets you take a step back. For example, in the fourth canto here of the Bhagavad Purana, we hear the story of King Anga, who was a very nice king, very opulent, wonderful. But he had a terrible son. His son was horrible. He was like a real psychopath, his son. He would kill his playmates and little animals, like a real horrible, cruel person. So he tried to teach him, to make him better, but he couldn't. So when he was already grown up and he was such a horrible person, he was like, you know what? He was so unhappy. He was so unhappy that like his only child, and he's the king, so it's like, this is my only child, is like a psychopath. He was very unhappy. What can you do? But he used that. He says, you know what? I'm going to use this. And he just used it to become completely detached from the world. And he just went off to the forest to dedicate himself to meditation. So he used that unhappiness. So at the very least, anything bad you're going through, divorce, disease, financial issues, pain, whatever that, at least you can use that to become detached and focus on your true eternal self. So tolerance means patiently enduring unhappiness. Very profound. Next, and steadfastness occurs when one conquers the tongue and genitals. Now, this is a very interesting thing that comes up in the yoga tradition. It's like, how do you become steady? How do you become fixed? How do you become tranquil in mind? And you think of all these different things, and they say, no, actually it's the tongue. It starts with the tongue, and then the genitals. But the tongue first. It's interesting. The tongue first. So the tongue is considered a big obstacle to self-improvement and self-realization. Why? Because the tongue does two things. One, it talks. And two, it wants to eat tasty things. So these two things, you can definitely deal with them, but you can also ruin your life with them. You can actually ruin your life. You can actually get killed because of them. You can kill yourself, actually a huge percentage of the world population today, especially in Western countries, but all over the world now. They're actually killing themselves because of the tongue. They have what they call the SAD diet, Standard American Diet, which is now no longer just American, it's all over the world. And the SAD diet kills you. That's why you get obesity, you get higher cancer incident, you have diabetes, you have heart disease, all the main killers, all the top things that kill people in the world today, the top sources of death. And they're all coming because of the tongue. The tongue is a number one enemy there. People are eating things that kill them. And the meat and the processed foods and the fat and the sugar and the oily stuff and of course what to speak of other desires people have for the tongue, like alcohol. So these things kill you. Actually kill you. And then in talking. Now the problem with talking is that when you talk, your mind, your consciousness gets profoundly affected by your words. Of course, people who are hearing your words get affected as well. But the speaker gets the most of what's going on. So if there's hatred being spoken, of course, if you hear hate speech, it affects you. But the person speaking the hate speech, they're absolutely involved with that hate. They're just brimming with it. And on the positive side, that's why I love doing what I do. Because when I speak these words, you get some benefit, I hope, but I'm getting lots of benefit because I'm completely absorbed in it to be able to speak these words. I'm completely absorbed in these teachings. So the effect I'm getting from speaking these words is greater than the effect you'll get by hearing them. It's a weird thing. You end up getting benefited more. You're trying to help people, and that's what it is. When you're trying to help people, you help yourself even more. You just said it's you get when you give. It's giving that gives you. So when you give, you get more. And when you speak, you get absorbed in what you're speaking. And people then tend to speak nonsense. People speak cuss words, they speak low vibration topics, they speak about nonsense, they speak gossip, hatred, speak based on envy, right? That's what people like to talk about. So when people do that, the tongue, even if you're writing, it's the same thing. Because before it used to be just the tongue, now it's like our fingers. But the concept is of speech, of communication. Let's say just communicate. So when you communicate through your fingers or your keyboard or touch screen or your tongue, you become absorbed by those words. Those words that profoundly affect your consciousness. So because of that, Krishna says, you won't be steady because you're talking nonsense, right? Just obviously, if you start talking, you get riled up. It's like, when there's politics, people get so riled up, right? Their minds get so agitated. Oh, and this and that, and he said that, and he's this, oh, and he's that, and they're so horrible, and they're so horrible, and they're this, and they're communists, and they're Hitler, and they're fascists, and you get so agitated, right? People, your mind is just, so where's the steadfast mind? Where's the calm mind to be able to observe thoughts and emotions, observe feelings, observe the world as a witness? It's gone. It's gone out of the window. There's no chance of that because you're so agitated, you're so identified because you're talking all this nonsense. You get really involved. Your mind is just like a roller coaster. Roller coaster. And people like that. That's why people follow these things, because they like being on this roller coaster. So they think their lives are getting ruined, they're getting all stressed out, they're missing the whole point of life. But they get attracted to it because it's rajas. Rajas attracts rajasic people. So your mind gets agitated, so your tongue. So eating and speaking, your tongue, very careful. If you can carefully control that, if you can eat sattvic foods, you'll become healthy. your mind will become clearer. And then if you can choose wisely your words, your mind can be calm. Krishna gives the guideline for that. I've done a video on that here on this channel as well. Krishna gives the guideline for that in chapter 17 of Bhagavad-gita, where he basically says, look, 3 things. Speak truthfully. Not just truthfully, but make sure it's useful. And not just truthful and useful, make sure it's kind. So these 3 filters, right? So you see someone and they're overweight, so you can just say, you're fat. That's true. And that might even be useful in the sense of like encouraging the person to lose weight, but it's not kind. So you don't say it. At least you don't say it like that. You don't say it. So he has to go through the 3 filters. It has to be truthful, necessary, useful, and kind. Or he says, just chant holy mantras, texts, scriptures, just do just stuff like we're doing here. So he says, do that with your speech. Either apply these 3 filters or, just speak mantras and cite the holy texts. So that's a way to control your tongue nicely. You can just, ask yourself, if what I'm writing, is it going through these 3 filters? Or is it just like some wonderful holy, mantra that I'm just sharing here? If not, maybe you shouldn't say it or write it. The world would be a much better place if you didn't. So those are the 3. So that's the tongue. And then, of course, the genitals. So that's more famous, right? We know that's... But actually, even the religious make a big deal of the genitals. It's actually not that big of a deal, right? I mean, let's be honest. If you see how much religion people like talking about... But actually, in my life, probably in your life, probably in the life of most people in your family, it's actually not a problem, right? People aren't going crazy. Of course, there are horrible people. There's horrific things going on because of genitals, right? People are horrific, slaves, sex slaves, child pornography, horrible things. Of course, and rape. There's horrific things that happen because people don't control their genitals. Abuse, sex abuse, horrific things, of course. But those are just outright criminals. They're just outright criminal behavior. And most people aren't criminals. So it's a small percentage of the population that practices criminal sexual behavior, thank God. So for most people, it's not an issue. The tongue is much more dangerous, as you can see. The tongue is a much bigger problem. We all suffer with the tongue problem. We all have to worry about what we eat and what we speak, and we've all eaten things we shouldn't eat, and we've all spoken and written and communicated things we shouldn't have done, shouldn't have said or written. We all do that all the time. Probably yesterday, even today, you might have slipped, and done something wrong with your tongue, but not your genitals. I'm sure, no, most people haven't committed rape today or something, or sexually abused someone, or not, So the genitals is secondary. So the first thing is actually the tongue. I think it's very interesting. I've always loved that. When I first saw this, what? The tongue? I always heard about the genitals, but the tongue, yeah, the tongue, and it makes much more sense. Okay, now, before we finish, what about the title of the class, Giri? Okay, this is it now. The greatest charity, Krishna says, is to give up all aggression toward others. I love this definition. What is charity? And you think, okay, charity is giving money, it's giving things, it's giving food, a blanket, giving time. All these things you can think of giving. Right? But Krishna says no. The greatest charity is to give up aggression. Wow. So the greatest charity is to take the vow of ahimsa, of non-violence. And that is a huge charity. Can you imagine if everybody practiced this charity? The world would be paradise. Ahimsa, non-violence. And ahimsa, just to understand the term, means that you don't commit violence that goes against Dharma. But you do commit the necessary violence to practice your Dharma. So what does that mean? For example, Arjuna was in a battlefield. So what are we talking about non-violence? Bhagavad-gita was spoken on a battlefield. But no, the violence Arjuna was practicing on the battlefield was his Dharma. He's a soldier. He was defending the Constitution. He was actually defending the world against an invasion of aliens, of Asura aliens. But, never mind that. But at the very least, he was defending the Constitution. He was, the throne had been usurped. It had been a coup by the Duryodhana and company. So he was practicing the law. He was practicing his Dharma. He was there to uphold the law, the last means possible, which is through violence. He tried diplomacy. They tried decades and decades of negotiations and diplomacy, and it didn't work. So, the last resort is violence. But it was dharmic. So even though he was a soldier engaged in a very bloody battle of Kurukshetra, millions of people died. But that was ahimsa. So it's the minimum amount of violence necessary to practice your Dharma. We eat. So just yesterday I was having lettuce. I killed the lettuce. You have to kill the lettuce. You like carrot? You have to kill the carrot. But that's okay because it's my Dharma to take care of my body. It's my Dharma, it's my responsibility. I have to do it for Krishna. So in order to practice my Dharma, I had to kill the lettuce and the carrot. So that was the least, I had to do it. But that was the least amount of violence. I could have caused more violence by eating meat, but I didn't because that's too much violence. That would break the code of ahimsa. That would just be violence. So non-violence means the least amount of violence necessary to practice your dharmas, to fulfill your duties, your dharmas. It's a very good definition of non-violence and a very wonderful definition of what charity really is, the greatest charity. So let's all go out and make a vow to really try to practice this greatest of all charities of non-violence. So we're going to be stopping here. There are lots more to come, so make sure you come back next week if Krishna allows us to continue. We have lots other definitions coming forth from Krishna. So have your rest of your day with lots of peace, lots of love. Hare Krishna.